Los Angeles. It's the second most populous city in the US and one of the biggest in the entire world. It feels like it was always like that. But the truth is, just a century ago, it was a much smaller city. But in just 20 years, from 1910 to 1930, the population grew from 300,000 residents to 1.2 million. And the area of the city increased from about 200 square kilometers to over 1,000 square kilometers. And all of this happened in just 20 years. That's literally nothing. The reason? The construction of Los Angeles Aqueduct. This is the main reason why Los Angeles today looks the way it does. But the history of the aqueduct is pretty messy, to say the least. It was very political, there were a lot of lies, a lot of crooked practices, and some people that were very unhappy that this aqueduct was built even dynamited it multiple times. The history behind it is very interesting, and when I only started researching it, I didn't expect it to be this messy. Well, in this video, I'll talk about the history of the Los Angeles Aqueduct, and I'll also briefly explain how it works. There are two key people behind the construction of the aqueduct and all the mess that surrounds it. Fred Eaton and William Mulholland. Yes, the guy that Mulholland Drive and Mulholland Dam were named after. That's this Mulholland. Eaton and Mulholland met each other when they both worked at some private LA company in the 1880s. Eaton eventually decided to run for LA mayor, promising the city to build a new, better water system. After he won the election, he pretty quickly turned that private water company to city control. And Mulholland, who at that time was already the superintendent, Eaton knew that Mulholland basically knew more than anyone about how the water system works, so he led him at his position. Both of them had this vision that LA would grow into a much larger city, but they also understood that water supply would be a limiting factor. Eaton remembered that when he was on a trip some time ago, he saw this lake, Owens Lake, and realized that he could just build an aqueduct and deliver that fresh water, which came from the Sierra Nevada mountains. He could bring that water to LA. It was a brilliant idea because aqueducts don't require any electricity to work. The water flows solely because of gravity. I mean, that lake is at a much higher altitude than LA. So yeah, an aqueduct will be a perfect choice. There was a problem though. The United States Bureau of Reclamation had plans to irrigate the Owens Valley to help the farmers that were there, which would block LA from getting the water. So Eaton started to buy a bunch of land and water rights in the valley. Thankfully, he also had a friend in the bureau that he hired as a private consultant for the city to recommend the best way to get the water rights. Eaton was eventually able to secure enough water rights, but now there was another obstacle. LA needed rights of way across federal land, for canals, pipes, etc. California senators sponsored a bill to give LA the rights, but the congressman of the county where the Owens Lake is located blocked the bill. I mean, for obvious reasons, because that was kinda their water, and now LA wanted to take it. This issue quickly became political, but ultimately, the senator met with Theodore Roosevelt, president of the US at the time, who sided with LA and gave them rights of way. Now, all that was left was to convince the public, the residents of Los Angeles, to approve the funding of the aqueduct. They needed over $500 million if adjusted for inflation. That's a lot of money. And what's the best way to convince people to approve this bill? By scaring them. So they started to dump a bunch of water from reservoirs into the sewer system, creating an artificial drought. They also published some scare articles in the newspapers. That worked, and the funding was approved. So, in 1908, they started the construction. Now let's talk about how it works. The idea is actually very simple. As I already said, aqueducts don't require electricity to work, just gravity. So, the Los Angeles Aqueduct just diverts the water from the Owens River, and that water, solely by gravity, flows into the city through a bunch of open canals and conduit, and yeah. That's basically it. They actually also generate electricity using that water, making it very cost effective. The construction was finished in 1913, LA got a bunch of fresh water, and yeah, it seems like the end of the story. But actually, that's where the real fun begins. As the demand for water started to increase, LA started to take more and more water from the Owens River, which was feeding the Owens Lake. This led Avon's Lake to completely dry up in just 10 years. And that place, which was previously pretty green, now turned into a literal desert. Obviously, the farmers that were there were very, very unhappy. I mean, they were basically left without water, and their place turned into desert. And again, that was kinda their water. So they formed like a group and started to rebel against the aqueduct. The most notable incident occurred in 1924, when those farmers literally dynamited part of the aqueduct. They also dynamited the power plant, opened the gates to let water flow back to the valley, and did some other stuff. And they would probably keep doing that, but just a couple years later, the bank where all those farmers were holding their money collapsed because its owners were convicted of embezzlement. Those owners were also the leaders of that rebellion group. So the loss of money and the fact that the leaders were now in prison stopped the opposition. LA won. They continued to buy land, and by 1928, they already owned like 90% of all water rights. In the 1930s, as there was an even higher demand for water, Los Angeles decided to extend the aqueduct even further north. And in the 1960s, they built the second aqueduct, because they weren't using all the water available to them, which meant they could lose water rights for that water they weren't using. Getting back to the beginning of the video, the reason why Los Angeles grew so rapidly after the construction of the aqueduct was the fact that LA wasn't allowed to sell water to anyone, but to the city itself. So all those adjacent communities and towns quickly realized that they didn't have enough water, so they decided to annex themselves to the city of Los Angeles, like willingly. And this whole annexation was like so rapid that LA grew from 300,000 residents and 200 square kilometers in 1910 to 1.2 million residents and over 1,000 square kilometers in 1930. In just 20 years, this is how LA got so big. That was all because of the aqueduct. Yeah, its history is very messy, but without it, there won't be LA that we all know.